Well, hi there, and welcome to an interview, really. I thought it might be a good idea, fun idea, for you all to have a chance to get to know your new pastor a little bit. So I'm here with Reverend Kate Walker. She's going to be your new pastor. She's starting on July the 1st, and she's so excited to be here, but you'll get to hear her say exactly what excites her about serving Grace at this time. And so we're just gonna spend a couple of minutes here going over some questions that she and I have written together. And you'll get to know her, you get to hear some of her thoughts, and just hear, obviously, directly from her. So, Kate, welcome. Glad that you're here. And so I have here a brief introduction. This is Kate, and Kate is awesome. And I certainly think that Kate is awesome. But I wanted to, before we kind of start talking about some of the things that Grace is facing and going through, I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to let you talk to your congregation and say, this is who I am and what I'm about. So why don't you tell us a little bit of yourself? Do you have passions, hobbies, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So it's good to meet you all. I look forward to meeting you in person, either July 1st or whenever pandemic lets that happen. So I have been a pastor since 2014, but I've worked in churches longer than that. Colin and I both worked in churches all the way back in college. And when I'm not working, I love to do tabletop games. So my husband and I own a collection of board and other sundry games. And I have a group that I play with on Wednesday nights on Discord. Cool. We do, that's our kind of standing small group space. We have a lot of fun. We have currently 5 cats, okay. Which is a very long story. But we love them a lot. They're our fur babies. And we're looking forward to being up here and being in the Heights.
Yeah, so you mentioned Patrick. I think you mentioned Patrick. Now, where did you guys meet?
So we actually met at Centenary, though we never dated there. Yeah. So we met there and then kind of drifted apart and went to a mutual friend's wedding by the name of Mary Gossett, which is where we kind of reconnected. And we got married a few years later.
Yeah, okay. So how long have you guys been married?
It'll be 10 years in October.
Okay, cool. And Patrick and I think we're actually the same class at Centenary, isn't that right?
Yeah.
And then, so tell me about Patrick. What does Patrick do for a living?
So Patrick is a technology consultant, computer programmer. He works for a company called Sagetti, and so they contract him out to different people around Houston. He actually works from home most of the time now. So he spends a lot of days in front of the computer with the earphones on, doing the meetings and writing the code. Yeah,
there's actually a really good, I know you've seen the house that where you guys are going to live. There's a really good office that I bet Patrick can use over the parsonage.
He might be coveting a little bit.
Yeah. So it's safe to say Patrick is in IT?
Yes.
IT supported at least?
Yes. Self-started, but yeah.
So let me show you a picture. I think you've seen this before.
Actually, he's seen this as well. I showed it to him.
So you're seeing this now on your screen. So, Kate, this is right behind your office, or right behind what will be your desk here in a few weeks. Can Patrick fix that?
Well, Patrick's excited to dig through it, I guess would be the way to say it. I'm one of those people that used to be good at tech, and then I married somebody who was better, and so now I don't have to do it anymore. So I showed him this, and he was like, "Oh, that means they have this kind of internet," and da-da-da. Oh, and maybe they're hosting their website. I was like, okay, I love that you can get that from wires.
No idea.
But
I have no idea. I was just like, oh, maybe Patrick can.
I was like, black box, silver box, blue wire. Okay.
Right. So we'll get into college in a little bit, but tell us where you went to seminary.
So I went to Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. They make you say the whole thing. Yeah. It's in Evanston, which is just north of Chicago. So if you watch The Princess Bride, Evanston, Illinois. Okay. That's where the little boy lives.
So what was it about Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary that got you excited about moving all the way to Illinois rather than like a Perkins, which is in Dallas, or Bright, which is in Fort Worth?
So I wasn't really. I was only sort of looking at seminary, right? Because I hadn't actually planned to get ordained. I was kind of moving into Christian education and youth ministry. And I happened to interview with a recruiter because they had recruiters come down every year. That's how several of my friends ended up at Garrett. And so kind of met with him, talked with him, had a good conversation, actually started the application and then stopped it. But David Otto, who was a religious studies professor, wrote me a recommendation letter that led them to contact me and say, you should finish that application so that you can come visit us so we can give you money. And that's the rest, it's sort of, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
Yeah, that was not the way it was for me at Perkins.
I'm sorry.
They said, how can we take your money?
Oh.
So let's see, what would you say if you were to give like a top one or a top two of like some of your pastoral strengths, top pastoral strengths? Like what would you say those would be?
So I really, I'm very much the creative, reflective kind of vision person. So in addition to working in a couple of local churches, I've also worked with some conference programs, helping churches do vision work and discern values. I'm really a teacher by nature. That's my kind of primary spiritual gift. And sort of use that in lots of different ways to, I always say I like to help people find their voice, right?
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That actually kind of is a great segue because as you well know by now that Grace is sort of going through its own transition at this point. Facing some stressors. There's a little bit of anxiety. Do we merge? Do we not merge? What's the best path towards the future? Of ministry at Grace United Methodist Church. So, church, I'll tell you this: that I personally think that you couldn't have a better choice for your pastor at this time. But I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to say, what are some of your strengths and graces and gifts that you think might help kind of lead Grace through this period of time.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm really excited. The reason I transitioned out of lay ministry and into ordained ministry was to really help churches do revitalization work, right? So I've mostly worked in churches that were trying to kind of find where they were going now and discern, not just who they'd been, but what God was leading them to. And so it's the thing I love to do most in ministry. And so it's kind of exciting to be stepping into this place along with Grace as they do that. You'll probably get really tired of me asking questions, some version of the question, like, what makes Grace Grace? There'll be lots of ways that I ask that question. But I think it's the thing that, all of us, there's 4 Methodist churches in the Heights.
Very, very. So I'll go ahead and tell you, this is the only one in the Houston Heights.
Okay, yes.
But you're absolutely right.
Yes.
There are 3 other Methodist churches that are very, very close.
I can almost walk to a friend's church, So when you have that saturation, we have the same thing in Deer Park, right? There's 6 churches. There's only one church in Deer Park, but there's 6 within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And they're all there for a reason, right? God planted all of those communities, all those Methodist communities, with some kind of identity that's unique and that brings the gospel in their particular way that's needed in their mission field. I think sometimes as churches, just as we get into the rhythm of doing church, we forget to kind of stop and look at that purpose, or we get really attracted by what's the cool program that they're doing over there, or what worked out of the box from the last big conference we went to. And when we lose that uniqueness, it may take a while, but people can kind of tell, and we start to lose a sense of who we are and who God called us to be. And when we rediscover that, it's incredibly attractive. I mean, John Wesley said, "Light on fire, and people will come from miles just to watch you burn." Right?
Oh, that's fantastic.
When you're really excited, not just about God in general, but what God is doing in your community and why you are so special. You sell yourself, right? People will want to be there.
Yeah, and I think that you'll find, and I've told you already a time or two, one of my thoughts behind what makes Grace Grace is that it's just it's a lovely family feeling kind of community, So I think if Grace even grew to say 300 or 400 or 500 in worship, down the road, that they would still be interested in being together at one worship service, because that's a real I think passion for the folks here, and I think that maybe what Grace is experiencing as it, growing pains or anxieties really is kind of like a microcosm of what's happening really across Christendom. But more specifically, if you can talk about a global church in a specific way, but more specifically what's happening at the global church, United Methodist Church level. And so I was wondering, do you have thoughts that you'd like to share on how you might think you and Grace will be able to sort of face the rough weather that may be that may be coming down the pike as the church at the top levels, begins to perhaps go through schism?
Yeah, it's always so anxious because we do the same thing with politics, right? Everybody votes in a presidential election and nobody votes for school board.
Right.
But your school board has so much effect on your life,
Right.
maybe even more so than who's president. So I think what's happening at the Journal Church is really important in that it is a conversation about who we are and who we're going to be and how we organize ourselves. So, I mean, the United Methodist Church is built on this really kind of, we call ourselves a global church, but if you look at our church structure, it directly mirrors American government, right? So we're built on this very particular Anglo system of running yourself, which sort of works for everyone and sort of doesn't work for everyone. And we've known that for a long time. We let the central conferences have some flexibility in their governance because what works in New York doesn't necessarily work in Ghana, right?
Right.
But in the U.S. is a really big place in and of itself, and I think we're just starting to find that out for ourselves, that what works in New York may not even be what works in Texas, and that we might need some of that same flexibility as we make decisions. It's just been a really painful process to kind of get there. I always take comfort from the fact that the Methodist Church is one of the most stable, unstable bodies in history. So we've been around.
We've schismed before.
Split apart. We come back together. We've spun off. The CME, the AME, the Free Methodist that still exists in Mississippi. And yet somehow this Methodist witness, this Wesleyan witness, has always continued. And I think that will remain true through this season, right? There will be a Big C church. There will be a Wesleyan witness in the Heights. I think we're just trying to figure out what name are we putting on it and what is most important to us as we proclaim the gospel. One of the things that Bishop Jones and I actually really agree on is that churches ought to be thinking about what is the thing they most need to do to reach the people in their locality, right? At that school board level,
absolutely.
As much as around the world.
Yeah, and I think that you'll find there's some relationships at Grace already, at that local level, but there's that can certainly be built upon and fertilized and and made even stronger. And kind of going back to that global church feel. There's really one, I'm sure you're aware of this, but there's really only one other global church. That's the Catholic Church. And they have an entirely different governance structure.
Right.
That makes it in some ways easier to exist as a global church, whereas the Methodist Church,
and the Anglicans come close, but I mean, they do it they're a global church, but in a much more even kind of dispersed way than we are, right? They're kind of multi-denominations bound together in a tree.
Yeah, and a lot of times their organizational structure kind of stops at like the national level, and then those national leaders. Yeah, so that's just really interesting, and I'm excited to see what you and Grace kind of figure out together. So let's end this interview with a question, and I have no idea what she's going to say, but you and I were both in college for a period of time, I think 3 years together, and we were both in the Church Careers Institute, or CCI. I don't even, it's called something different now.
Christian Leadership?
Yeah.
It's
I'm not
different.
sure, but when we were there,
maybe?
it was CCI. So we knew a lot of the same folks. You already mentioned some of the professors, Dr. Otto.
Yep.
And so I'm curious, do you have like a particular memory of me or us in college? And feel free to make fun of me as much as you like.
So I was really trying to remember because we were sort of like tangentially. Like we ran in CC, we weren't that close. I remember you always in your chore shirt, which for those who didn't go to Centenary, there's no I in choir. But the only like really clear like interaction memory I have of us, and you probably don't remember this, we were on James Hall, our residence hall. We lived in the same residence hall one year, and we were on council together. And we were planning something, I don't even remember, and I hadn't talked very much in the meeting, and then I talked for a long time, as I'm given to do. Sorry, friends. And you just stopped, and you looked at me, and you went, "You get paid to go to school here, don't you?" And it was like the first thing you'd ever said to me. I was just like, didn't even know how to answer. I was like, maybe.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is Colin talk for. You're a lot smarter than me, aren't you?
It was just so funny. Like that just shaped my
Yeah.
Colin. But I do remember you singing really well.
Oh, thank you.
And being a part of, you ran with a group of people I really admired.
Yeah.
And that was fun.
Yeah. And I had some good folks in what we both did in college that I really looked up to. So, Kate, I'm so excited about that you're taking over the reins at Grace. I think it's as I said already. I can't think of a more perfect leader at this time for Grace. So welcome, and of course, if there's anything I can do to help you with the transition, I will do. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do.
And we'll be in prayers for you
Yes,
as you go to
thank you.
Pollard.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a big change. We're moving from Houston to Tyler, so we're looking forward to it. But I know that Kate's going to do an extremely good job here. So if you have any questions for her, she already has a Grace in the Heights email address. It's pastorkate@graceintheheights.org. Feel free to reach out to her. I know that she'll be excited to meet all of you. And yeah, I guess that concludes our time. Thanks a lot,
That's great.
Kate.
Thanks for doing this.
Okay.